The year is 2004 and things are not looking good for the oceanic flight that crash-landed on Lost Island. This was also the year when Spider-Man defeated Doc Ock. Players got sucked into World of Warcraft, and Outcast wanted you to say, hey yeah. But we're not here to shake it like a Polaroid picture, because we're counting down Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 2004. Ice cold. After 5 years of EGM fawning over realistic racing sims, Burnout 3 Takedown is here to remind everybody just how much fun an arcade-style racer can be. This is the anti-Gran Turismo, with any sense of realism tossed out the window in favor of cars ramming each other off the road goodness. And let me tell you, no game is better at ramming cars off the road than Burnout 3. Brian called it hell on wheels and said that he can't stop sinning. Burnout 3 blows the doors off of its predecessors with blistering fast online play, a massive single-player mode lousy with unlockables, and all the right gameplay tweaks. If you really have a need for speed, don't bother waiting for EA's Underground sequel. Get burned out here. Like me, Damien loved that Burnout 3 shied away from the usual trappings of realistic racing sims. There's no gear ratio tweaking, no credits to hoard, no neon to buy, no sprawling world to free roam around. Just pure arcade racing with simple controls that's so good, you never miss all that other stuff. He concluded that this must-own sequel only has 3 problems. No map, crummy rubber band opponents, and long load times. With a score of 9.2 out of 10, Burnout 3 Takedown may have been able to just barely earn a spot on this top 10 list, but it comes just shy of being the year's best reviewed racing game. We'll figure out who took home that prize in just a few moments. Because of magazine lead time, Electronic Gaming Monthly ended up reviewing 2 different Tony Hawk sequels in the span of 12 months. They started the year off by reviewing Tony Hawk's Underground in January, followed by a review of Tony Hawk's Underground 2 at the end of the year in their December issue. This gives us a chance to compare the 2 games side by side to see which jackass-infused skateboarding game came out on top. And while Tony Hawk's Underground 2 definitely put up a good fight and managed to earn a solid score of 8.8 out of 10, it was the original Underground that was the clear winner with an average of 9.3 and a spot on this list as the 9th best reviewed game of 2004. Milkman gave it a perfect 10 and argued that in some ways it's the best in the series. The thing that makes Thug so damn good is that it allows for infinite customization, all of which you can upload to Neversoft's servers. This means that once you get bored of the pre-made levels, you can download user-created content. If that's not awesome, then I don't know what is. Greg Ford liked all the stuff that Milkman mentioned, including the ability to upload your own face into the character creator, but had a couple of complaints. First, besides Hawaii, none of the levels stand out as overly memorable. Second, while Thug offers some innovations, it remains fundamentally the same game. So, if you're sick of grinding a bench, manualing into a half pipe, and then pulling off a McTwist, this won't bring you back. With a 9.3 out of 10, Tony Hawk's Underground would mark the final time the series would show up on one of these best of lists. Yeah, see you around, Birdman. So, you know how most years have 12 months? Well, apparently that was not the case in 2004, because after EGM got done publishing January, February, March, and then all the way up to December, they then followed it up with a holiday 2004 issue. This allowed them to review all the biggest holiday releases without pushing them into the new year, which is something they honestly should have been doing for at least a decade. As it turns out, one of the unexpected side effects of adding this 13th issue is that half of the games we're going to talk about in this episode came from EGM 186. Yeah, that's right, 5 of the 10 games were from one single issue. That includes Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, the 3rd and best reviewed installment of Sony's long-running action platformer series. Receiving a perfect 10 out of 10 from one of the editors, this is the kind of release that would normally have been the game of the month in any other issue. But in the holiday 2004 issue, it's completely overshadowed by 4 other games. Calling 2004 the year of the platformer, Brian says the Ratchet & Clank 3 sticks to the formula. Up Your Arsenal features superb platforming stages and heavy-duty combat. Our heroes equipped with bigger, badder weapons with even more upgrades. And metallic sidekick Clank solo bits, while rare, are much more enjoyable. Joe liked it even more than that, saying that by doling out new weapons, upgrades, and gadgets, Insomniac has created a game that rewards players with an almost perpetual feeling of accomplishment. It's quite a hook, but the oddball humor and madcap pacing are what keep you coming back. Sure, it may have been overshadowed by some of 2004's biggest games, but Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal still delivers the action with a stellar average of 9.3 out of 10. That's a height the franchise would never reach again. When we last checked in with Metroid Prime, it was not only EGM's best reviewed game of 2003, but also a first-person adventure game that marked a sea change for the genre. Now, only a few issues later, the franchise has dropped from first place all the way down to number 7. But hey, don't freak out, Samus stans, because it's not that EGM didn't like Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, but rather that 2004 was so loaded with massive releases, the Nintendo sequel got buried underneath Halo, Grand Theft Auto, Metal Gear Solid, and pretty much every other big-budget franchise you can think of. Shane was surprised that instead of going bigger and flashier, Retro Studios opted for a slightly low-key sequel. He compared it to Majora's Mask and complained that Echoes drops the ball when it comes to the plot. He was also disappointed by the world design, which feels small. Even though the 4 areas exist in both the light and dark worlds, those worlds seem so similar that it all comes off as a bit cramped. Brian gave Prime 2 a perfect 10 out of 10, but acknowledged that it doesn't feel too much like the last game. In terms of weaponry and equipment, the majority of the beams, visors, and suits are completely new. Plus, the classic screw attack makes its 3D debut and pulls off the transition as beautifully as the rest of the franchise's features have. Brian's 10 helps to lift the average up to a 9.3 out of 10, which is just enough to land it at the number 7 position. If you watched our EGM and the launch game series, then it'll come as no surprise that Electronic Gaming Monthly adored the Project Gotham Racing series. The franchise went from being the top-rated game at the Xbox launch to the best-reviewed game overall at the debut of the 360. But I hear what you're saying. What about Project Gotham Racing 2, the sequel that links those two must-play games together? It was, once again, the top-rated racing game of the year, narrowly beating out Burnout 3 Takedown for that prize. Sure, the critics were impressed with the great graphics and the wide variety of modes, but it was the Xbox Live integration that would cement Project Gotham 2 as the most-owned racing game of the year. Damien explains why that's important. Project Gotham Racing 2 is also one of the first Xbox Live Aware titles. So not only can you play against random yahoos via Live, we can also see how your scores for each of the single-player events stack up against the rest of the world. It's genius! Che also loved the Xbox Live integration, saying that online gaming is currently what sets Xbox apart from the competition. And Project Gotham Racing 2 is the first title to take full advantage of what it means to be live-enabled. You won't find a more value-packed racer anywhere on any system. With an average of 9.5 out of 10, Project Gotham Racing 2 is not only the top-rated racing game of 2004, but also the best-reviewed Project Gotham Racing installment overall. Sadly, the series would eventually be phased out in favor of Forza. Man, they should really bring Project Gotham Racing back. You know, a lot has changed in the 6 years since Konami released the original Metal Gear Solid. For one thing, we've seen a real push towards cinematic stories in games, which was one of the franchise's biggest selling points back in 1998. We've also seen the rise of stealthy competitors, including a more than formidable foe in Splinter Cell. Now, you would think that all these things would work against Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, but Hideo Kojima had a secret weapon up his sleeve, and that was to make the game as weird and memorable as possible. Sure, you may prefer the stealth gameplay in Pandora Tomorrow, I get that. But you're never gonna forget Snake Eater's massive open world and crazy plot twists. It's the developers daring you to find a game that's more cinematic and more over the top than this. And in 2004, that could not be done. Shane gave Snake Eater a 10 and likened it to playing a really good game. You know that feeling when you're watching the ending credits of a really amazing game? When you instantly yearn to start all over and discover all the stuff you missed along the way? Well, you'll be feeling that way 5 hours into Metal Gear Solid 3. Simply put, it's the deepest, longest, and most replayable chapter in the Metal Gear Solid series yet. Brian loved the level design, saying that the new emphasis on outdoor play presents welcome changes to the sneaky, as the uneven terrain makes the patterns of patrolling guards less predictable. Plus, the lack of on-screen radar and the ability to slice someone's jugular with the new, intuitive close-quarters combat move add to the tension. The critics also agreed that the game looked better than it should on the PlayStation 2 and featured some of the best boss fights of all time. This third installment ties with Metal Gear Solid 2 with an average score of 9.5 out of 10. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Ninja Gaiden is the closest we're going to get to a fighting game on our Best of 2004 list. You see, this was an especially weak year for one-on-one fighters, with the highest scoring game being Guilty Gear X2 Reload, which came in 31st place. Thankfully, by combining the best elements of 3D brawlers and fighting games, Tecmo's Ninja Gaiden reboot had enough going for it to scratch that multi-hit combo itch. This was one of the generation's defining action games, giving players a challenging adventure that requires both patience and skill to complete. The EGM critics fell in love with Ninja Gaiden, with all three editors giving the game near-perfect scores. Shane gushed that it's as good as you hoped it would be. Hell, it's actually better! He loved running down crumbling walls, swimming through flooded tombs, leaping over oozing rivers of magma, and fighting off waves of enemies, all of which take advantage of the tight and compelling gameplay. CJ argued that Ninja Gaiden comes with stunning visuals, but it's more than just a pretty picture. Gaiden's gameplay is equally well crafted, with responsive controls that demand fighting game caliber reflexes. They all agreed that the game is punishingly difficult and gave Ninja Gaiden an average of 9.5 out of 10. The problem with these top 10 lists is that the focus is so narrow that they can miss out on some of the year's biggest games and trends. A good example of that is Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, which averaged a 9 out of 10 when it was reviewed in the January 2003 issue of EGM. This was a seminal release that changed the way that critics looked at the stealth genre, but in a competitive year like 2003, a 9 out of 10 only earned you a spot at number 25, far outside of the top 10. If Ubisoft wants to get mentioned in one of these videos, then they're gonna have to do a lot better than that. And that is exactly what they did with Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, the 2004 sequel that was a massive leap forward for the franchise in every possible way. To say that Shu was wowed by the game would be an understatement, to say the least. Pandora Tomorrow is that wow game, and thus deserves a 10, and I'm not talking about a damn, these graphics look fine kind of wow. From the opening cinema to the last stage, from the single to the multiplayer, Pandora Tomorrow is the most incredible stealthy soldier game around. He said that it sets a new standard that eclipses even the almighty Metal Gear Solid. Oh, blasphemy! Crispin loved everything that Shu raved about, as well as the inventive multiplayer mode. The revolutionary Spooks vs. Guards online game packs an ever-steep learning curve likely to intimidate casual spies. In fact, I can guarantee that you won't have fun the first time you dive in. But stick with it. Once you master the tactics and memorize the level's layout, you won't be able to log off. That is, until you try a new level and have to figure out all of its intricacies from scratch. Yeah, we may have missed out on talking about the game last year, but Pandora Tomorrow earns a 9.7 out of 10 and proves that Splinter Cell is a franchise worth paying attention to. When people ask me why Grand Theft Auto games always seem to earn impossibly high scores, I'm quick to tell them it's because they always exceed expectations. Just look at Grand Theft Auto 3, a game that was covered with a heavy amount of skepticism before release and then went on to single-handedly popularize the open world genre. The same thing happened with Vice City, which not only improved on the sandbox action in every way possible, but added so much style and nostalgia that it was impossible not to fall in love. Now comes San Andreas, a game that was designed to up the ante and almost overwhelm the player. It gave us a massive and constantly changing world to explore, 3 different cities, hundreds of songs, the biggest Hollywood stars, tons of freedom, and even the ability to gain a bunch of weight if you really want to. In other words, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas didn't just match the ambitious heights of the previous games, but exceeded them. And when a developer exceeds expectations by that much, critics are a lot more willing to overlook some of its imperfections, even the obvious ones. Reading the reviews 16 years later, it's clear that the EGM critics were shocked by just how big and immersive the game was. John said that he was prepared for something big, but he wasn't quite ready for it to be frickin' enormous. Rarely do you experience a game that is busting out new moves and experiences all the way through to the very end. Such is the scale of the game that major characters voiced by well-known stars don't even make their first appearance until more than 40 hours in. Shu said that he felt like a kid again. My fun is only limited by my imagination. For example, I spent twice as long in the first city, Los Santos, as Crispin did because I was really determined to fight rival gangs for turf, work out until my arms looked like Popeyes, and stuff my girlfriend's ever-hungry face with food. And all this wasn't even helping me finish the game. To be fair, all the editors had complaints about the inflexible missions, some glitches, and a lot of janky moments. But the absurd size and scale of the adventure made it impossible for the game to average anything lower than a 10 out of 10. It may have taken 3 years and 36 issues, but the world finally has a Halo killer. And it's Halo 2. Yeah, I kid, but that was the feeling at the time. It seemed like every company was trying to outdo Master Chief's first-person adventures, with almost all of them coming up way short. What's so impressive about Halo 2 isn't that it's a huge step forward as both a single and multiplayer game, but rather how easy Bungie makes it look. It's all so effortless, almost as if the developer is sitting there scratching their heads wondering why everybody else can't catch up. Besides Metroid Prime 2, the only first-person game to even come close to Halo 2 was the Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay, which averaged an 8.7 out of 10. Yeah, that's a great score, but with all of the editors giving the Halo sequel perfect 10s, it's hard to compete. EGM reviewed both the single and the multiplayer mode separately, much preferring one over the other. In fact, in some ways, the critics seemed a little disappointed by the story. Chi pushes back a little. You could argue that given all the hype, Halo 2 is disappointingly more the same, but with more weapons, vehicles, enemies, and a much better storyline. He liked the way that Bungie humanized the Covenant, though noted that it brings even more questions than answers. Mark was frustrated that he couldn't say more about the story. Unfortunately, one of Halo 2's biggest strengths is what I'm allowed to talk about the least. Thankfully, he had plenty of time to talk about the massive scale of the levels, the incredible firepower, the cool new vehicles, and yes, even the stunning new environments. Now, while the editors carefully danced around the major spoilers, they felt liberated when it came to the multiplayer modes. Shu was quick to bring up the game's most important new feature. No doubt, a lot of Halo 2's multiplayer is just Halos with a new coat of fine silver polish. But the biggest addition allows more people to battle together than ever before, and that's online play. Now those of you with Xbox Live can forget about lugging around all the hardware for local networked games. It's all so wonderful. Like, I'm gonna spend the next year of my life online with Halo 2 kind of wonderful. You easily have enough here to keep you playing forever. I don't know about forever. Anyway, some critics even wondered if Halo needed a single player mode at all, since the online multiplayer mode should probably be the series' focus. With everybody in awe of both halves of the game, Halo 2 averages an unbeatable 10 out of 10, making it Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed game of 2004. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of EGM's Best and Worst. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we're going to be posting 2 new episodes every week leading up to New Year's. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite game from 2004? Obviously, it doesn't have to be one of the games on this list. It can be anything from 2004, even one of the bad games if you want. Hell, at least one of the games that we talked about technically came out in 2003, so you probably shouldn't mention that one. Go ahead and let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Friday with a look at Electronic Gaming Monthly's worst reviewed games of 2004. You definitely don't want to miss that, so I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,